It is the most democratic substance on earth. It sits in the plastic booths of roadside diners and on the linen-draped tables of five-star steakhouses. In America, it is more than a condiment. It's a cultural baseline. 97% of US households have a bottle in the fridge right now. But if you traveled back to the year 1834, you wouldn't find this red sauce on a burger. You'd find it in the medicine cabinet. In the 1830s, an Ohio physician named Dr. John Cook Bennett marketed ketchup as a universal cure-all. He claimed it could treat diarrhea, indigestion, rheumatism, and even jaundice. He turned the tomato into a pill, promising a chemical revolution for the human gut. But even Dr. Bennett was late to the party, because the ketchup the world first fell in love with wasn't made of tomatoes. It wasn't red, and it didn't taste like sugar. It was a dark, pungent, fermented slurry of fish guts and salt. This is the story of how a liquid byproduct of ancient preservation survived 300 years of colonial greed, industrial warfare, and a poison apple scare to become the most successful flavor profile in human history. Long before it was a brand name, ketchup was a sound. In the Hokkien Chinese dialect of the Fujian province, it was called times kôe-chiap times or times ketchup. Translation? Brine of pickled fish. To the people living along the maritime Silk Road in the 1300s, this wasn't a topping, it was survival. In a world without refrigeration, the only way to keep protein from rotting in the sweltering heat was salt. This was a biological hack. By packing fish in salt, you triggered a process where enzymes in the fish's digestive tract would break down their own proteins. The result was a liquid explosion of times umami times, that elusive fifth taste that tells the human brain, this is savory, this is energy, this is life. For centuries, kôe-chiap times was the secret engine of Asian cuisine. It was a shelf-stable concentrate of pure flavor. It was traded by merchants from the Gulf of Tonkin to the Indonesian archipelago. It was rugged, it was salty, and, to the European palate, which was about to stumble upon it, it was unlike anything they had ever tasted. Enter the British East India Company. By the late 1600s, the British were the world's ultimate middlemen. They were obsessed with spices, silk, and anything that could make their bland, boiled English diets less miserable. British sailors discovered times kôe-chiap times in the markets of Sumatra and Malaysia. They loved it for two reasons. First, it made their salted ship rations, which were often rancid, actually edible. Second, it didn't spoil. You could keep a barrel of this stuff in the hold of a ship for 2 years, and it would still be good. By the time the recipe reached London, the name had been anglicized to catchup. But there was a problem, a massive logistical problem. England didn't have the right fish, the right climate, or the 300 years of fermented tradition required to make the real thing. The British began to pirate the recipe, using whatever they had on hand. This led to the Great Mushroom Era. For over 100 years, if you asked for ketchup in London, you got a thin, salty liquid made from salted mushrooms. Jane Austen loved it, Prince Regent obsessed over it. They made ketchup out of walnuts, out of peaches, out of celery, and even out of oysters. But notice what's missing. The one ingredient we consider essential today was nowhere to be found. The tomato. In the 1700s, the tomato was a pariah. Europeans called them poison apples. They were beautiful, yes, but they were members of the nightshade family. People believed that eating a tomato would turn your blood to acid or lead to instant death. There was even a persistent myth that wealthy aristocrats died after eating them, not realizing that the high acidity of the tomato was actually leaching lead from their expensive pewter plates. The tomato was a decorative garden plant, a forbidden fruit that no sane person would turn into a sauce. Ketchup was a dark, salty, mushroomy liquid, a shadow of its Asian ancestor, waiting for a catalyst to turn it red. That catalyst would come from the New World. But it wasn't just a change in ingredients, it was a change in the very nature of how humans consumed food. The stage was set for a collision between ancient fermentation and the birth of the American industrial machine. But before the tomato could save ketchup, it had to survive a smear campaign that almost erased it from history. To understand why it took so long for the tomato to meet the bottle, you have to understand the fear. In the 1700s, the tomato was the poison apple. It belonged to the Solanaceae family, the nightshades. Its cousins were mandrake, henbane, and belladonna plants associated with witchcraft, hallucinations, and agonizing death. In the aristocratic dining rooms of Europe and the American colonies, the tomato was a killer. Here's the historical irony. The tomato wasn't actually killing people. The plates were. Wealthy families used pewter tableware, which was high in lead. The acidity of the tomato would leach the lead out of the plate and into the food, causing lead poisoning. Because the poor ate off wood, they were fine. But the narrative was set. The tomato was a beautiful, red trap. It was grown in gardens as an ornamental curiosity, something to look at, but never to touch. It took until 1812 for an American physician named James Mees to publish the first recipe for tomato-based ketchup. He called tomatoes love apples, but his sauce was a far cry from the thick, sugary condiment we know. It was thin, watery, and fermented. It still carried that ghostly DNA of the original Asian fish sauce, salty, funky, and prone to rotting within days. This is where the story gets dark. Because there was no refrigeration, 19th century ketchup was a biological gamble. To keep the sauce from exploding in the bottle due to fermentation, producers began a chemical arms race. They added coal tar to make it look redder. They added salicylic acid, borax, and even formaldehyde to stop the rot. By the mid-1800s, ketchup was a toxic sludge. A contemporary cookbook author, Pierre Blot, called it filthy, decomposed, and putrid. If you bought a bottle of ketchup in 1860, you weren't just buying a condiment, you were buying a ticket to the emergency room. The industry was a wild west of adulterated food, and the public was starting to notice. The everything sauce was on the verge of extinction. Enter the man who would turn a fermented fish byproduct into a global empire, Henry J. Heinz. Heinz wasn't just a food producer, he was a marketing genius and a hygiene obsessive. He looked at the sea of murky, brown bottles filled with chemicals and saw a massive opportunity. Heinz's revolution was built on two pillars: purity and visibility. While other companies used dark green or brown glass to hide their moldy dyed product, Heinz did the unthinkable. He used clear glass. He wanted you to see the deep, natural red of his sauce. He wanted you to see that there were no separation layers, no mold, no coal tar. But to get that red without chemicals, he needed a scientific breakthrough. Working with his head chemist, G.F. Mason, Heinz discovered that if you increased the amount of vinegar and sugar, natural preservatives, and used high-quality, ripe tomato pulp instead of scraps, you didn't need the poison. Heinz became an unlikely hero of the Progressive era, lobbying for the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act. He weaponized government regulation to crush his competitors who couldn't afford to be clean. With the safety of the bottle secured, ketchup underwent a biological transformation. It became the ultimate bridge flavor. Humans are biologically hardwired to seek out 5 tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. Most foods hit 1 or 2. Ketchup? Heinz's perfected recipe hit all 5. The umami from the tomatoes, the sweetness from the sugar, the sour from the vinegar, the salt, and the slight bitter edge of the spices. It was a flavor cheat code. It didn't just accompany food, it dominated it. It made the bland, industrialized calories of the 20th century, the factory-processed meats, and the starchy potatoes palatable. It was the American sauce. And as American culture exported itself through Hollywood and fast food, ketchup went with it. By the 1950s, the transformation was complete. The ancient Asian fish sauce, born in the heat of the Mekong, had been bleached, tomatoed, sugared, and sterilized into a uniform, shelf-stable product that tasted exactly the same in London as it did in Los Angeles. It became the symbol of American industrial consistency. But look closely at that bottle in your fridge. Underneath the high-fructose corn syrup and the grade A tomatoes, the ghost of the Times Ketchup Times still lingers. It's there in the savory depth, the umami that we now spend billions trying to replicate in labs. Ketchup is more than just a condiment. It is a map of human history. It's a story of how a fermented accident in a Vietnamese fishing village traveled across oceans, survived a poison scare, fueled the British Empire, and eventually became the red lifeblood of the American century. We think we're just dipping a fry, but really, we're tasting 3,000 years of global trade, chemical warfare, and a relentless human obsession with finding the perfect bite. So, the next time you tap the bottom of the glass, remember, you aren't just waiting for a sauce, you're waiting for the world to pour out